Cold. Welcome to balmy Dallas, Texas. I'm Ahmad. This is my 2022 Kia EV6 all-wheel drive. This month marks 1 year of ownership of this Kia EV6. And as you can see, it's come a long way. But not just the car, but also my experience with EVs has come a long way. It's crazy to think that just 1 year ago, I did the road trip all the way from Green Bay to Chicago to Texas, where I picked up my friend in Chicago, Jordan, who you might be familiar with. And I didn't know anything about EVs. I didn't know anything about charging them. I didn't know the ownership experience. I didn't know the infrastructure or lack of. And I've learned a lot. So in this video, what I wanted to cover is, what do I like about this car specifically? What do I not like about this car or the ownership part? And also, am I itching to get a different car? Am I itching to switch this up to a Tesla or a Mach-E or a Polestar or any of those competitors? And then another question that I've been getting a lot recently is, do I want the EV6 GT and replace this? So I'm going to cover all those things on top of cool things about this car, bad things about this car, issues I've had. It is freezing out here. I'm cold. I've been filming B-roll, so I'm ready to get inside and start talking about this car, my 2022 EV6 Wind all-wheel drive. Let's get started.
This is the 2022 Kia EV6.
First of all, let's quickly cover my EV6. It's a 2022 Kia EV6 Wind all-wheel drive with the tech package. It's in Glacier White, and I bought it brand new from Dorsch Kia in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I purchased it about a year ago on February 12th, and I paid MSRP, and it's my first EV ever. I did get the 1K charge pass from Electrify America, and because I bought it before August, I did get the $7,500 EV credit. So why the Wind over the GT line? There was multiple things that I kind of took into account when I was making a decision. I did make a small list, so I apologize if I'm referencing down here. It's a long video, and I just need to make sure I'm covering all of my points properly. But really, number 1 and 2 were availability and markup. Now, there were things that went into these decisions, so it wasn't just availability and markup, but I'll talk about those separately. But really, it came down to what is in the market right now, what do I really need out of this car, and what are nice to haves. I was at a price point where I was used to buying cars between 30 and 40K, and now I'm looking at cars 50 to 60K. So it was already a little out of my comfort zone. And yes, I did account for the fact that I'm saving gas money, but there's still a bigger payment involved and install of the EVs and all that kind of stuff. So that being said, the markups were really that pushed me towards the Wind, because the GT line was at the top of my budget already, and I could not find a GT line at MSRP at the time. So I kind of already started exploring what the Wind would look like. But it really sealed the deal for me when I found out 2 things about the Wind. One was, number 1, you can get the all-wheel drive on the Wind. So to me, all-wheel drive was the most important factor because I wanted something a little bit zippier. And then I found out you can get the tech package. So at the same time as my EV6, I also owned a Stinger GT. It wasn't the GT1 or the GT2, but it was the GT, but it had the tech package. It included HDA, it included adaptive cruise control. So I knew there was features I didn't want to lose. But the Wind all-wheel drive tech package actually added more features than I even had on my Stinger, which includes the 360 cameras, and I'll talk about those separately. So really, compiled with the fact that I could get all-wheel drive, the Wind tech package kind of sealed the deal for me, let alone the fact that I wanted either Glacier or Snow White, and I didn't want to pay more than MSRP. I went for it, and that's how I ended up with the Wind. So what are some of the things that I do like about the Wind over the GT line? Because to me, there's really 3 standout features, and one is the lack of gloss black. It's very less gloss black in this cabin compared to the GT line. And then on top of that, I actually have touch buttons versus capacitive buttons. And to me, that's a pretty big deal. And then last but not least, the lack of sunroof gives you a little bit more headroom. I'm 5'8", so it wasn't that big of a selling point for me. In fact, I would actually prefer the sunroof, but I could see how that would be a negative for some people who are taller than me. There's 2 things that I really, really wish I had in this car that the GT line offers that my Wind does not. And number 1 is the interior ambient lighting. The lighting in this car is so awesome. That GT line lighting across the dashboard, across the center console, it's next level. It's a very nice to have because it is super dark in this car at night because there's absolutely no ambient lighting. And number 2 is the pop-out door handles. I don't hate these door handles. I just think they're kind of cumbersome. So I do like the fact that on the GT line you can get the pop-out door handles. Other than that, the sunroof is a kind of a nice to have just from an airy perspective, making the back feel a little bit more open. But there was really nothing else that was appealing to me. The bumpers, I knew that I was going to do aftermarket stuff to this. The wheels were not a selling point for me at all because I knew I was going to do aftermarket wheels. It doesn't come with any different suspension or brakes. So from a performance perspective, all you were really gaining is bigger wheels, which I switched anyway. So, however, there are some things that I think some people will care about. And I think it's important to note that these features might sell you on a GT line versus a Wind. And number one is heads-up display. I covered that. It's actually really cool. The only thing with the heads-up display is it really integrates itself with the factory navigation system. I have never once wanted to use the factory navigation. I use Google Maps. So to me, the augmented reality was cool, but it was definitely not something I needed. The better looking wheels. If you're not planning on upgrading wheels, the 19s that come with the Wind they're ugly. I think they don't fit the car very well. They're too small. They're too sunk in. The offsets are not very good. So you do get much nicer looking wheels with the GT line. Number three, bumpers. If you don't plan on doing a lot of aftermarket stuff to the front lips or the rear or splitters or anything like that, the GT line does look a little bit more aggressive. It looks a little bit better. That's subjective, right? Some people actually think the Wind looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit more simple. However, I think the GT line design language speaks more to me. However, I do like my M&S lip kit with the Wind compared to the GT line. The one thing I didn't mention is the lighter seats. If you get a GT line with the lighter colored seats, it actually makes the interior look a little bit less darker as well. So just some things to consider if you are between the two trims. All right, so 1 year in, what does a wear and tear look like on this car? Number one, the plastics scratch fairly easily. Now, they're not super fragile, but you definitely want to be a little bit careful. Now, there's some of those Amazon kits that you can buy that kind of cover up the plastic pieces with like a vinyl or something like that. Highly recommended if you just want to kind of keep everything looking good. Where it's really bad is the back trim. So the back of the seats are very, very cheap plastic, as well as the back of the center console. So my kid's basically tearing up the plastics in the back. They feel a lot cheaper back there than they do here. Number two, the paint is soft and thin. If you plan on keeping this car for more than 3, 4, 5 years, I would definitely recommend getting some sort of PPF or something. Really, I would at least get the front wrap because the paint is a little bit softer. It chips fairly easily. Number three, the rear center console is really oddly designed. It actually moves back and forth with how much the rear seat is kind of leaned back. So let me show you this. Very, very odd design. I don't know why they would do this. At first I thought we broke it, but it turns out the further forward you lean the seat, the more it leans down and it looks like it's broken. The screen and the controls all look very good. So I don't have any complaints with the screen or anything. Now there are screen protectors you can buy to reduce smudging. Honestly, I just carry microfiber cloth and I just wipe it down every now and then. It looks good. They're dust magnets, but what isn't at this point? And the seats are also wearing very well. They are still very comfortable. And last but not least, the mats. All the mats that I had, the Kia factory mats, I got them. The cloth ones are garbage. Kia mats have always felt really cheap. However, I did also get the all-weather ones from Europe, and they were actually pretty cool. They just didn't cover the sides a lot. And I've actually done a video on this because I worked with 3D mats. I have a promotional code, so if you need 3D mats, which is what I still prefer, please go to my video and get the promo code, order them, you get some money off. But I highly recommend replacing the mats because the mats that you can get from the factory just aren't that great, especially if you live in a wet or a snowy climate. The all-season mats that come from Kia don't really go up the sides, so you'll get this interior dirty pretty quickly. So let's talk about the power. Is it adequate? So I would say personally that about 95 to 98% of the population would be fine with this much power. With a 0 to 60 at 4.6-ish to 4.68 seconds, and I've done videos on that if you want to watch it, it's fairly quick, just instant torque all the time, and it's more than adequate for, I think, most people. Now, what about the GT, the car that's been in the press a lot lately, and it's been showing up on US shores basically the last couple of months? Yes, that car is significantly faster. In fact, I think the GT is way too much car for most of the general population, but I also don't think the general population is the one shopping for the GT. The GT has a 0 to 60 of about 3.2, 3.4 seconds, something like that, which is 1.2 to 1.4 seconds faster than what the all-wheel drive version does, which on paper might not sound like a lot, but that is a significant amount on how it feels when you're driving it on a daily basis. Now, it does come with its own shortcomings, and it comes with sacrifices that you have to make. Also, another quick note, Wind and GT Line all-wheel drive have the same exact power plant. So just clarifying that. So is the power adequate enough against the GT? The short answer for me is yes. The all-wheel drive variants of this car are plenty quick. They're fun off the line. They get you on the highway at very, very nice speeds, and you can pass people. And the GT is for people who are really hardcore enthusiasts and want that instant zip. The performance is similar to what you would get on a performance model for a Tesla. And for some people that is important, just that exhilarating feeling. I personally love it, but I don't think I'm ready to invest in another EV6 that has some shortcomings, but just gets me a faster speed. But what I really want to talk about is the rear-wheel drive versus the all-wheel drive. Now, I'm probably going to get flamed for this because there's a lot of rear-wheel drive owners out there, and I get it. There's budget reasons. There's a lot of justifications that I hear, like, oh, I don't live in weather where I need all-wheel drive. At the end of the day, if you're going to aim for an EV with that much power, I would probably honestly recommend other EVs. Now, the only reason I would get this in rear-wheel drive is if you really just love the look of it. Other than that, I don't see a really big reason. And when I hear people buying rear-wheel drive, I say, have you test driven an all-wheel drive? And I would highly recommend going to test drive it. Okay, so let's talk issues. What are some of the issues or some of the annoying things that have happened with the car or just with the experience of owning the EV6? And so my number one was the amp issue. And I think a lot of us experienced the amp issue, especially people who bought certain builds, early builds. And that's where our amp randomly went out and then the audio would stop working. And the problem wasn't necessarily that was a problem, that the amp was going out, but it was the dealer response and the dealer knowledge. And it took me, and I did a video on this, 6 weeks to get the amp replaced at the time, where some people waited a little bit longer, some people didn't wait as long. If you know your amp is out and you call the dealership and they schedule a time for you to come in and analyze it or look at it or whatever, see if they'll just order the amp ahead of time, because what'll happen is you'll get there, they'll look at it, and then they'll be like, yeah, the amp needs to be replaced. You'll be like, yeah, I know. And then they'll order it, and then it'll be another few weeks or whatever it is now. And number two, some people do hear clunking from the motors coming to a full stop, or even just starting from a dead stop and you start moving, you can hear a little bit of a clunk. And I think there was a TSB for it, and I think it was fixed. I haven't fixed mine yet. I hear it every now and then. It doesn't bother me that much, but it is kind of annoying because it feels like something's breaking. So remote start Celsius change. If you started your car with the app, so if you remote start your car with the app and you turn the climate on, basically, it would automatically transfer your Fahrenheit over to Celsius. And in the US, obviously, we use Fahrenheit. So every time we would get in the car, if I started with my app, it would be switched over to Celsius, and we would have to manually go in and fix it. So I think there is a software update for this, as I mentioned, and it's been fixed. I'm just going to take care of it on my 16,000 mile service. Updates. So I don't even know what to say about the updates. The updates are super random. Some updates were apparently achieved over the air, but then I've had to do an update using a USB cable. I don't know what the future holds. I talked about plans on one of my last videos, and if you get the highest plan to subscribe to the Kia app, you get over-the-air updates. But then if you don't get the others, I'm not sure if you do get the updates. But there's just no guarantee that any update is over the air. For the most part, we've had to take our cars into the dealership to get updates done, or even get, obviously TSBs done and stuff like that are always at the dealership. Next one, the dealership experience. I think across the board, most of us can say that our dealerships, although you might have a good dealership, just don't really know much about this car, or they have to call in like a Kia certified technician to only work on this car, even for the most basic stuff. Now, I get it. I understand why that's necessary, because you don't want everybody just diagnosing what's going on. But at the same time, a lot of dealerships say, it's like, oh no, we can't do anything. We have to wait until this person shows up, or we don't have any availability until this person shows up. So it's not the best. And then also, you still don't get that $60,000 car experience with Kia dealerships. There's some that are really nice looking, like the one I go to is really nice looking, but the experience is still not to the level that you'd expect for a $60,000 car. I personally don't really care that much. My contact with the dealership is so little that it doesn't really bother me, as long as they're fixing what I needed to And then the app itself is down a lot. There's so many times in the morning I wake up and I try to get on the app and it's just not working. The server is down, or they have an issue, or it's down for maintenance. So the app just I'm not 100% confident that it's always there when I need it. It's not the end of the world, but there are hours sometimes it'll go by and you can't even access the app. A lot of people have had the 12-volt battery fail, which is the normal car battery, not the one that's under the car that powers the whole car. Now, this battery is usually used when you're using accessories and the car's not on all the way, but also there's what we call the orange light of death that happens on this car. When the car is charging the 12-volt battery, this orange light pops up. Now, it's not a bad light. It just means that it's being charged. A lot of people have had failed batteries, meaning the car just does not start. So you can't power the car on, so you actually have to jump the 12-volt battery, which is why I have a battery pack in my frunk. So we'll talk about that shortly. So the fix for that right now is they do order a replacement battery, but I've heard it takes weeks in some cases. So what are you supposed to do? Not drive your car? And then there's also a couple aftermarket companies that have already launched batteries for this car, and a couple of people have replaced the battery just to be ahead of it. But I think there's warranty issues with that, so it wouldn't cover under warranty. So just something to be aware of, that there is a 12-volt battery issue. And then the finicky remote start or climate start. Sometimes I will start my car, and about 80% of the time I'll get in my car and the temperature is where I wanted it to be. It's either hot or cold the way I set it up. There's about 20% of the time I get in and nothing's been done and the car is just on. So I think other people have dealt with this a little bit, and I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if there's a sequence or whatever it is, but sometimes I get in and the car's freezing in the morning. It's rare, but it happens, and it's really frustrating when it does. Okay, so let's quickly cover the maintenance and updates. I've had one dealer visit for maintenance, and it was an 8,000-mile service that they needed to get done. And that included me driving to the dealership, dropping my car off, and them saying, oh, so we're just going to rotate your tires and replace your cabin air filter. And I was like, oh, well, you don't need to rotate my tires because I just replaced the wheels. And then cabin air filter, sell it to me. I'll take care of it in 10 seconds. It literally takes 10 to 15 seconds to replace a cabin air filter. And I bought it for $30-something. You can probably find it cheaper on Amazon, maybe for 20 bucks, 25 bucks. But I bought it, came home, put it in myself, reset the light, and I have service until 16K. So preconditioning, everybody's wondering when preconditioning is coming in, especially if you live in a cold climate. So let's quickly talk about range. So how's my range been? We usually charge the car around 40 to 60%. Whenever the car hits about 40%, we charge it up to 80 or 90, whatever we decide. So it's hard for me to say how many miles I get in the city, but I can say if I was to kind of average it out, around the city, I'm probably getting between 260 to 300. A lot of regen happens around town, but I estimate it's going to be between 260 and 300. Now, on the highway, I've had very mixed kind of experiences. I've done multiple trips to Houston. There's one where I was able to easily make it 200 miles to the charger. There was one where I had a nerve-wracking drive to make it to 200 miles, and I had to slow down, turn the heater off. So on the highway, I would say, depending on weather and wind and everything, I would estimate on a wind all-wheel drive, or even a GT line all-wheel drive, same power plant, a good buffer zone is about 180 to 190 miles. Plan a stop, charging stop. And then my good range that I've gotten on the highway is about 220 on the highway, doing 65, 70. But then if you're going to go over 70, 75, I would plan for a stop between 170 and 180. And then if there's a headwind, probably that's the furthest you'll go. So it sounds really low, but these are like harsh conditions, right? If you're on a highway with a speed limit of 75 or 80, you'll watch that range drop pretty dramatically. So road trips not only take a little bit longer because of charging stops, but also because you're likely going to go 65 to 70 miles an hour. Otherwise, your range is going to take a pretty big hit. If you have access to multiple chargers all along your route, then you could probably do 75. But if you have 150 to 180 miles between chargers, I would highly recommend staying around 65, maybe 70 miles an hour. So what level 2 charger did I end up with? I went for Wallbox. I looked at a lot of competitors like Juicebox and Grizzly. At the end of the day, they all do the same thing. They have an app, it has Wi-Fi, I can keep track of all those things. But in full transparency, I think I've logged into this app maybe once or twice in the last year.
just don't really use the smart features that much. I could see why some people would. That being said, I wanted to make sure I bought a good brand, so make sure you do because this is electricity you're messing with. It cost me about $450 to buy this, and then almost $700 to get the level 2 charger installed in my garage. At the end of the day, I could have probably just gone with a nice level 2 cable and been fine, but just wanted to future proof myself because I can take this with me when I leave.
All right, so as I drive around, I'm going to attempt to just quickly talk about the modifications on my car and my path to where I am now with the mods that are on the car. So when I first bought the car, I was very used to having a car that didn't have a lot of aftermarket support. The EV6, until fairly recently, didn't have too much aftermarket support. Rightfully so, first generation, all that. So anyway, when I first got the car, I started doing some universal mods, which is what I did on my Buick Regal Tour X. So if you watched my video of me modifying my EV6, a lot of them are just universal pieces, as well as plastic dipping and stuff. So I just did what I could with the stuff that was available. There was a company overseas that was making a really cool spoiler. It was really pricey, so I didn't import it. I'll put the link here if you're curious about it. And then, of course, wheels was the first thing I did. I hated the stock 19s, and I knew I would hate them. So I ordered some wheels. I have the Avid wheels, and I absolutely love these wheels still. A little aggressive on the offset, but I think it fits the look of the car. I'd been keeping in touch with M&S, which was a company that I talked to a lot when I had my Kia Stinger. In fact, I had their coilovers and a couple of their kind of splitters and stuff like that installed on my car, and I loved their stuff. It paid off because they finally reached out to me and said, hey, we're working on some stuff for the EV6. And to me, that was like everything I ever wanted. A, I got to go to SEMA, but B, they were using my car to help develop a kit for the EV6, which I was really, really happy about. Car gets dropped off in Houston. You can watch the videos of my SEMA experience. And man, when I saw it at SEMA, I was blown away. But I want to quickly cover what I do have currently on the car. So right now I have the M&S lip kit all around. So sides, front, and the rear. And then on top of that, I have the splitter kit made by Veloce or Veloce, however you want to say it, which is a sub-brand of M&S that makes the splitter kit. So I have a two-step basically kit all around the car, which really adds an aggressive tone to the car itself. And then I have the rear spats that are also on the charging door, and they are on the other side of the charging door, on the opposite side on the back. So let's talk suspension very quickly. Suspension-wise, months ago, the second Eibach released a spring kit for the EV6. Actually, it was for the Ioniq 5, but they said that they think it works on the EV6, so I ordered it. I got it from the UK before they were really available in the US. I got the springs. I did an install video on them, so I took this car apart, the suspension, knowing that nobody else had really messed with it or filmed it or anything, so I just did it. So if you haven't seen that video, you can watch the video if you ever want to do your own spring install on here. And I installed the Eibachs. Now, they were awesome looking. The drop was great. However, the ride was not very great. Now, on the highway, it soaked up some of the floaty feeling that you get with the EV6 factory. What I hated was just around town. It was rough. And for somebody with a really heavy tuner background, that may not be as big of an issue. But this is me and my wife and I's daily driver. And I wanted it to be as smooth as possible while still looking good. So I kind of tried to find that middle ground. I feel like what the Eibachs were designed for the Ioniq 5 suspension, which is a little bit softer than the EV6. And they just didn't mesh well with the EV6. So now there's people that have them and they like them. But now H&R has a suspension, some spring kit. However, what I'm on right now is the Storm springs. So when my car was being prepped for SEMA, M&S also has a sub-brand called Storm, and Storm released springs for the Korea market for the EV6. And those are what I have on my car now, and they're awesome. So they don't drop as aggressively as the Eibachs do, but man, they ride awesome. In fact, that's what I'm on now. My wife has never complained about the drive quality or anything like that. They corner well, they handle well, they're not too floaty, they're not too stiff, they soak up bumps really well, so they're just awesome. They are working on hopefully some US spec springs, which will be slightly lower. I hope that doesn't ruin kind of like the dampening, but as of right now, this is the perfect setup for me. Like, it's a subtle drop, just close enough, and with my lip kit, I think it's the perfect drop. And then lastly, I did black out my roof, so that was wrapped as soon as I got the car. And then I also blacked out all the silver around the car. So I actually originally plasti dipped it, but then when my car got prepped for SEMA, they actually went and wrapped it. And then I did black out my emblems, but that's about it. And then calipers, I did paint the calipers blue. Anyway, those are my modifications and a quick run through on how I got them modified. Now, if you own a GT line or a GT, there's stuff coming. I think every manufacturer who's making parts right now for the EV6 Wind is also now making parts for the GT. So just keep an eye out. All right, so a couple tips and tricks on regen. So what is regen? I'm not going to get into the technicalities of it, but it's basically where the car brakes to regenerate power back into the battery. So these paddles, the EV6 has these two paddles right here. They look very similar to what you would get in paddle shifting cars, like on automatics. And basically what they do is you'll see this number on the bottom left. It says level 3. So these paddles will control the level of regen. And I'll explain that in a second. So now if I press this paddle, it goes to level 2, it goes to level 1, and then you can also turn it off. If you go to this paddle, you can actually go to level 3, 4, and then max. We'll talk about what iPedal is in a second. But one of the cool things about this car is if you leave your regen at 3 or 2 and you're coming to a light, you can actually just pull and hold this paddle right here, and it'll actually maximize it for that certain amount of time that you're holding it. So you can maximum regen as you're coming to a light, and if you time it correctly, you can just use that as your brake while getting a bunch of power back. So what does iPedal mean? iPedal basically is 1 foot driving, if you're familiar with that on Teslas, meaning it'll just come to a complete stop without you ever having to touch the brake if you time everything correctly. One thing I have noticed, if you're an efficiency nerd, is if you go into drive mode and you're in eco, iPedal will always have both motors running. So it doesn't turn off one of the motors while you're not using it. So to me, it feels like it's a little bit less efficient. So I actually mostly drive in level 2 or 3. In fact, I think drive in level 2, because to me, that's basically the best mix of normal driving and not feeling jerky when you're coming to a stop. So what you'll see here is these bars. So when you start driving, there's a bar that goes up here, and that actually means you're using power. And if the bar goes under here, that means you're regenerating power. So I'm going to try to do it in my driveway and see if you can see both of those. But let's see here. Yeah, see, as I was coming to a stop, the bar actually goes under it. So that's basically explains your regen. And you sometimes see that number go up by 1 or 2 miles as you're regenning a lot. Another quick tip and trick. This is the dual menu where you press this button and it shifts between media and it shifts between the air control. So you can actually hold this button down, and what it'll do is it'll actually let you choose which default you want. So I have infotainment as my default. You can actually assign this button, the star button, and the star button to do different things. So what I have it for is this takes me to the main menu on my home screen right there. This actually takes me to my Android Auto if it's plugged in. And if I'm like in the car menu, I can just press that button. It takes me to my Android Auto. And to change what these buttons do, like these star buttons, you go to button. And here you can choose what the custom steering wheel button does, the mode button does. So a lot of cool little things that you can do. There's some cool stuff like 2-press unlock. So if you want to unlock all the doors by pressing it twice, you can do that. So really explore through the menus. There's a lot of cool stuff in here that you can kind of change. The other thing is you can choose dark or light mode. And you can change the dark light mode under screen theme layout. And that where you can choose white. I actually really don't like the white, so I just leave it at black. You can do automatic, so it shifts when you time of day, or you can schedule it. So cool little things. Split screen. This came with an Android update, so now you can have Android Auto music here, map here, vice versa. When I first got the car, it didn't have that update, so you got like this car menu here and then a small screen for Android Auto. Now it goes all the way across. And sound. The sound is abysmal on this car. It still sucks. So I use an app called Power Amp on my Android phone. So if you have an Android phone, please download Power Amp. It just makes the sound so much better. You can go in here and mess with all the different settings, but at the end of the day, it still does not sound that great. The bass is just very lacking. The hardware is there. The software, I think, continues to suck, because once I use Power Amp, I can actually turn the bass up, different frequencies of the bass up, and it sounds really, really good. And as part of the tech package, you do get the 360 cameras, so I want to show you those. So you press this button, and you can actually choose which route you want to go. So there's a really warped version of my Audi sitting back there. And then you've got this. You can zoom out if you want. The tech package is awesome. One more quick tip and trick. So my garage is fairly low. So what I want to do is adjust the height of how far my lift gate opens, because it does open pretty tall. So what you do is you just go to vehicle, and in this car you can actually control how far up it goes. So if you go to door, you can actually scroll all the way down, and here you'll see smart lift gate, which I've never actually used that. And then you can actually set the height. So you can choose different levels, or you can use this height setting and set your own. So I actually did that, and it helps a lot. Now I have bumped my head a few times because I forget how low it actually is. Just something I want to make sure everybody was aware of. So what's in my frunk, which is the little space that we have in the front of the car. So let's see what I keep in there. So in here, I have the tire mobility kit that it comes with. I have a car jump starter. This car is known for bad 12-volt batteries. And then I have the V2L kind of charger that enables you to add an outlet to your car. Your car basically works like a power outlet, generator, whatever you want to call it. It comes with the car itself. So let's talk resources. What resources are there for people who are trying to buy an EV6 or are already EV6 owners? And I want to cover this because if you are in the market, or if you're just new into the market for the EV6 and you might not be an enthusiast and involved in many groups, I want to make sure you know where you can go to get a lot of good information about the EV6. Number one is YouTube. There's obviously, I have a channel, but there's also a lot of others who have channels, and the press has covered this car extensively. Number two, there's multiple Facebook groups. There's US focused Facebook groups. There's Canada ones, US Canada. There's international. There's just lots of different ones. There's even a group for modified EV6s. One of the main reasons I'm on Facebook is the EV6 forums and my Golf R forums also. But I encourage you to just sign up for a Facebook trash account, whatever you want to call it, and just get on and just go through the Facebook posts, because the EV6 Facebook groups are freaking awesome. So check those out. Here's a couple that I'm going to put a screenshot of right here that I recommend. I actually run one of them, so there's really good resources. And then number three, it's a forum called KiaEV6.com, and it's got every Kia electric vehicle and massive amounts of posts on them. So I would check that link out as well. So those are the resources I recommend for you to learn a little bit more about the EV6. So some final thoughts. I'm going to make this quick. Number one, am I planning on replacing this? Do I have the urge to replace this with a Tesla or really any competitor? So let's talk about Tesla first. When we bought this car, my number one priority was getting a car that in town was just awesome. Sure, I could have gotten one with maybe slightly better range, but we wanted something more powerful. We wanted something that was just fun to drive, and also it looked really unique. So out of all of those things, Teslas do tick off like the powerful part, but when it comes to being unique and personality, there just wasn't any. The only reason I would ever consider a Tesla is if I was buying this car specifically to do longer road trips. And I'm not. I didn't buy an EV to do longer road trips. I did it for around town. If you're planning on level 2 charging at home most of the time, I don't really see the need to buy a Tesla. If you're planning on taking a lot of road trips, I definitely would consider a Tesla at that point. My short answer is I do not plan on replacing this car with a Tesla. If that changes because we're going to start doing a lot of road trips, which probably won't, I'll just take one of my ICE cars. So, number two, do I ever look at the competition, Polestars, Mach-E's, the Ioniq 5 even? The short answer is no. I literally just have not had that much of a desire to look at other cars. Now, I'm curious about them because I want to compare them to the EV6, but I don't ever think I'm getting to a point that I want to replace my EV6 with one of those competitors. If I stay non-Tesla, likely the EV6 is going to stick around. The only car that I'm considering, and this would not be a replacement for this EV6, it would maybe be a replacement for one of my ICE cars, is the Ioniq 5N. Now, there's a lot of unknowns about that car. I assume it's going to be very similar to the EV6 GT, so we'll see, and then we'll see what the price point comes at. But that's really one of the only cars that's interesting me.
I love the platform already. I'm familiar with it, and I love the look of the Ioniq 5, and I feel like I could do a lot of cool things with it as well. So that's really the only thing, and that would be an addition and not a replacement for the EV6. Last but not least, do I regret buying this car? I have absolutely zero regrets of buying this car. I think I bought it at the right time. I bought it at MSRP, which helped. I got the tax credit, which helped. But overall, Kia came swinging for the fences with this car. You consider like what they had, and I loved my Stinger, but this car, the interior, the design, the exterior design, everything is just so much better. It's just next level for Kia, and I'm really excited to see where this platform goes. I think for the time being, we're going to keep this car. I don't have the urge to get the GT. The GT is great. It's fast, but I really just honestly just don't want a bigger car payment to have slightly less features and slightly less range just because it makes a lot more power. I know there's other benefits of buying the GT. If I'm going to spend that money on a bigger car payment, I'm probably going to upgrade one of my ICE cars, in all honesty. That is my experience with the EV6. I hope this video helps. If you're shopping around for an EV, or even if you're an EV6 owner and you're kind of like, should I keep this? Should I look? Obviously, I encourage everybody to go shop around. Everybody has different tastes. But to me, for the bang for the buck, a wind all-wheel drive with tech, or even a GT line, it's just a really, really good car. It's great looking. It performs well. It's got really cool tech, although has minor issues here and there. But overall, I have zero regrets of buying this car. My wife loves this car. I don't think this is going anywhere. That is my 1-year experience with the Kia EV6. Thank you so much for the support for this channel as well. This has been 1 year since I started in modifications, and it's been a hell of a journey. Thank you for watching and for the support. Like and subscribe, and do the notifications thing. I guess everybody says that too. Subscribe, do the notifications, and I guess you'll get a notification. Thanks, everybody.